There are calls for security cameras to be installed in schools across the country in the wake of the suspected murder of a 12-year-old girl on the Gold Coast. Police are calling for CCTV vision to be handed in that may help with that investigation.
Dr. Emmeline Taylor is a senior lecturer in criminology at the Australian National University. She's extensively researched the impact of surveillance in schools, and she joins us now from Canberra. Dr. Taylor, thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, in one piece you wrote, you called this the slippery surveillance slope. What do you mean by that?
That's right. One of the issues that we find when we introduce surveillance is what is known as surveillance creep. Or function creep, whereby what starts off as just a handful of cameras with very clear objectives can quickly become the saturation of visual surveillance. And so, for example, in England, quite often regarded as the CCTV capital of the world, we now have some schools that have a ratio of 1 camera for every 5 students. So any school thinking about implementing surveillance really need to consider what the end process might be of this.
In terms of surveillance itself, it could potentially ease the concerns of parents whose children are at school and they're wondering who's loitering around the school gates, for example. Is there a place for surveillance if used correctly?
A few cameras, I think, strategically placed with very clear objectives, particularly at the entrances and exits of school, can provide that reassurance, as you mentioned. But sometimes, and research very often shows this, that it can actually give a false sense of security as well. And so some of the schools that I've visited and spoken to the students, they actually feel less safe when the CCTV has been introduced because they feel that no camera has ever jumped off a wall and actually prevented a crime from happening or having something stolen from them. They'd much rather a teacher or a member of staff was there to actually intervene.
Dr. Taylor, in regard to the calls in Queensland for security cameras in schools after the death of this 12-year-old girl, a renowned child safety advocate, high-profile advocate, Hetty Johnson from Bravehearts, has argued the welfare of children should come before privacy. Your reaction?
Every child deserves to feel safe and be safe whilst they're on school grounds and also on the journey to and from school. That is certainly not in question. The issue here is actually understanding the impacts and effectiveness of CCTV. We can think about this in terms of what I call the 3 Ds of effectiveness: deterrence, detection, and also the displacement of certain crimes. So the idea that CCTV will actually deter criminals is a very complex argument. A lot of the research shows that, particularly when we're looking at violent crimes, CCTV just simply doesn't deter these individuals because, for 2 reasons. One is that violent offenders quite often are not thinking rationally, they're not weighing up the risks, they're not concerned about the fact that their actions may be recorded. And the other issue is that CCTV is just too simply circumvented by these individuals. So wearing a hat or some form of disguise, such as sunglasses, means that simply your image isn't going to be captured.
Dr. Taylor, you also mentioned the impact. Let's talk about the effect of CCTV in different environments. For example, CCTV monitoring in schools where students are there to learn about themselves, to sort of look at their own boundaries and their social interactions. How is that different to CCTV on streets, around shops, for example?
Schools are a very different environment in which to introduce visual surveillance, which can have an enormous range of unintended consequences. So often it will be implemented with the clear objectives of crime and security, but through this surveillance creep, quickly it's repurposed. It can be used to manage student behaviour, it can be used for teacher performance, and sometimes it's used to, with the idea that it might prevent bullying or truancy, things like that. But the unintended consequences demonstrate that actually it can really stifle creativity, particularly when used in the classroom. Students report not feeling comfortable asking questions or answering questions because they know that there's a visual recording taking place and they're concerned about what will then happen with that footage. Many students also feel that the cameras are being turned inwards, that they're actually now scrutinising them. And so this introduces a certain amount of mistrust and suspicion within the school environment.
Dr. Emmeline Taylor from the ANU, thanks so much for sharing your insights and time with us.